The year was 2147, and humanity had spread across the solar system like seeds carried by the wind. There were cities on Mars now, domed structures that glowed against the red dust. There were mining stations on asteroids, pulling precious metals from rocks that floated in the endless dark. There were research bases on Europa, drilling through ice to study the ocean below. Humans had become a species that reached for the stars, and they had done so with loud engines and bright lights and radio signals that screamed into the void. Captain Jake stood on the bridge of the deep space cruiser Horizon, watching the gas giant Jupiter fill the viewport. He was a tall man with gray at his temples and calm eyes that had seen too many emergencies to panic at anything anymore. His ship was old but reliable, a workhorse that carried supplies between the outer colonies and Earth. It was supposed to be a routine mission. It was not. The sensor officer, a young woman named Price, looked up from her console with a face that had gone pale. She tried to speak, but the words would not come out at first. Jake turned to her and waited. "Sir," she finally said, "there is something coming out of hyperspace near Callisto." Jake frowned. Hyperspace travel was still experimental for humans. Only a few military vessels had the technology, and none of them were scheduled to be in this sector. He walked over to her station and looked at the readings himself. What he saw made his blood run cold. The object was massive. It was larger than any ship humanity had ever built. It was larger than some moons, and it was not human. "Get me a visual," Jake said quietly. The main screen flickered, and then the image appeared. The ship was shaped like nothing Jake had ever seen. It curved and twisted in ways that seemed impossible, as if the designers had never heard of straight lines. It was dark gray, almost black, and it moved through space with a grace that made human vessels look like clumsy children learning to walk. The bridge went silent. Every officer stared at the screen with wide eyes and open mouths. They all understood what they were looking at. "First contact." Jake was the first to recover. He turned to his communications officer, a man named Danny. "Are they transmitting anything?" Danny's hands shook as he worked his console. "Yes, sir. I am receiving a signal. It is not in any language I recognize, but the pattern suggests they are trying to communicate." "Record everything," Jake ordered, "and send a message to Earth Command. Tell them what we have found." The message would take nearly an hour to reach Earth, and the response would take another hour to come back. For now, Jake and his crew were alone with the alien vessel. Dr. Mary Cole arrived on the bridge moments later. She was the ship's, a scientist who had spent her entire career preparing for a moment that everyone assumed would never come. She was a small woman with curly brown hair and glasses that she constantly pushed up her nose. Her hands trembled with excitement as she took over Danny's station. "The signal is complex," she said after a few minutes of analysis. "They are using mathematics as a base, prime numbers, geometric sequences. They are trying to establish common ground." "Can you respond?" Jake asked. Mary nodded. "Give me time." For the next 3 hours, Mary worked without rest. She sent mathematical sequences back to the alien vessel. She received responses. Slowly, painfully, she began to build a bridge between two species that had never known each other existed. And then the aliens sent an image. They were tall and thin, with gray skin and large dark eyes. They had 4 arms and walked on 2 legs. They wore robes of deep blue, and their faces held expressions that Mary could not read. But there was something in the way they held themselves, something in the way their eyes moved, that struck her as strange. They looked afraid. The alien leader appeared on the screen and spoke through a translation device that turned his words into English. His voice was soft and careful. "We are he said. "I am High Emissary. We have traveled the stars for 50,000 of your years. We come in peace, and we wish to speak with the rulers of your world." Jake stepped forward. "I am Captain Jake of the Earth vessel Horizon. We welcome you to our solar system. Our leaders will want to meet with you." Nodded slowly. His large eyes studied Jake with an intensity that made the captain uncomfortable. "You are not hiding," the alien said. Jake did not understand the question. Hiding from what? Did not answer. Instead, he looked at the other on his bridge. They exchanged glances that carried meaning Jake could not decode. When turned back to the screen, his voice was even softer than before. "We will wait for your leaders," he said, "but we must ask you something first, something important." "Go ahead," Jake said. Leaned closer to the camera. His dark eyes were wide, and Jake realized with a shock that the alien was not just afraid. He was terrified. "How have you survived this long without hiding?" The question hung in the air like a weight. Jake looked at Mary, who looked back at him with confusion in her eyes. Neither of them knew what to say. Across the solar system, the news spread like fire. Aliens had arrived. Real aliens, with ships and technology and questions that made no sense. The United Earth Council called an emergency session. Military forces went on high alert. Scientists gathered to study every piece of data the horizon could send. And Ambassador Lisa Grant, a woman known for her calm under pressure, boarded a shuttle and headed for the outer planets. She was going to meet She was going to find out what they wanted. And she was going to learn why they were so afraid. The shuttle journey took 2 weeks. Lisa spent the time studying everything humanity knew about which was not much. She watched the recordings from the horizon. She read Mary Cole's linguistic analysis. She tried to understand the strange question had asked. "How have you survived this long without hiding?" It made no sense. Humanity had never hidden. From the first radio broadcasts in the early 20th century to the massive fusion engines that now pushed ships across the solar system, humans had always been loud. They had always been visible. They had never thought to do otherwise. What were they hiding from? When Lisa finally arrived at Ganymede Station, she found them waiting for her. They had sent a small delegation of 5 aliens, all of them dressed in those same blue robes. Stood at the front, his 4 arms folded across his chest. Lisa walked toward him with her head held high. She was not afraid. Humans had never learned to be afraid of the unknown. They had always faced it with curiosity and courage. She extended her hand, looked at it for a long moment, then reached out with one of his own hands and took it. The first handshake between species happened in silence. Billions of people watched from Earth. History was being made. But as Lisa looked into the dark eyes of the alien before her, she saw something that troubled her. She saw a species that had spent 50,000 years running from something. And she knew that humanity was about to learn what it was. Ambassador Lisa Grant had met many powerful people in her life. She had negotiated with presidents and generals, with billionaires and revolutionaries. She had faced down threats and pressure from every corner of Earth, but nothing had prepared her for the moment when she stepped aboard the flagship. The ship was enormous. From the outside, it had looked like a mountain floating in space. From the inside, it felt like a tomb. The corridors were dark. The walls absorbed light rather than reflecting it. Every surface was designed to be invisible, to blend into the blackness of space. There were no windows. There were no bright displays or glowing panels. Everything was built for one purpose: to hide. Walked beside her, his 4 arms moving in a rhythm she could not follow. His footsteps made no sound on the floor. His voice, when he spoke, was barely louder than a whisper. "You seem uncomfortable," he said. Lisa looked around at the shadows that surrounded her. "Your ship is very dark." "Yes," replied. "It must be. Light can be seen from great distances. Sound can be detected. Heat can be traced. We have learned to live without these things." "Learned from whom?" Lisa asked. Stopped walking. He turned to face her, and in the dim light, his large, dark eyes seemed to fill his entire face. "From necessity," he said. "From death. from watching every species that did not learn how to hide be erased from existence. He gestured for her to follow, and they entered a large chamber at the heart of the ship. Others were gathered there, along with Mary Cole and several human scientists who had been invited to observe. In the center of the room, a holographic display flickered to life. What Lisa saw made her breath catch in her throat. It was a map of the galaxy. Thousands of stars glowed in the darkness, each one marked with a symbol. Some were green, some were blue, some were yellow or orange, but most of them, the vast majority, were red. The red stars represent civilizations that have been destroyed, said. His voice was heavy with grief. Over the past 2 million years, more than 4,000 intelligent species have been wiped from existence. Their planets were stripped bare. Their populations were harvested. Nothing remains of them but dust and memories. Mary Cole stepped forward, her face pale. Harvested by whom? Waved his hand and the hologram changed. Now it showed a different kind of ship. It was angular and sharp, built from black metal that seemed to drink in the light. It moved through space with mechanical precision, and its size was beyond anything Lisa could comprehend. It was not a ship. It was a weapon. We call them the Harvesters, said. We do not know who built them. We do not know why they were created. We only know what they do. He waved his hand again, and the hologram showed a planet. It was a beautiful world, covered in blue oceans and green forests. Cities sparkled on its surface like jewels. Ships moved through its skis. It was alive. And then the Harvesters came. Lisa watched in horror as the machines descended on the planet. They did not bomb it. They did not burn it. They simply began to take it apart piece by piece. They pulled the cities from the ground. They drained the oceans. They stripped the atmosphere and harvested every living thing, loading them into vast cargo holds. When they were done, there was nothing left but a dead rock floating in space. This is what happens to any civilization that is detected, said. The Harvesters sweep through the galaxy every few thousand years. They scan for radio signals, for heat signatures, for any sign of technology. And when they find it, they come. Lisa felt sick. How long has this been going on? As far as we can tell, since before the first walked on our, the Harvesters are older than any species still alive. They are patient. They are thorough. And they cannot be stopped. Mary Cole was studying the hologram with intense focus. But you survived, she said. They have been around for 50,000 years. How? Lowered his head. We learned to hide. We turned off our lights. We silenced our broadcasts. We built our ships to be invisible and our cities to be undetectable. We gave up everything that made us visible, and in return, we were allowed to live. He turned to face Lisa directly. But your species has done none of these things. Your planet screams into the void with radio waves. Your ships burn bright with fusion engines. Your cities glow like beacons in the night. By every measure we understand, the Harvesters should have found you long ago. You should be dead. Lisa stood tall. She was not going to show fear in front of these aliens who had spent their existence running. We are not dead, she said simply. No, agreed. You are not. And that is why we came here. That is why dozens of species are now traveling toward your system, because you have done something impossible. You have survived without hiding. The hologram shifted one more time. It showed the solar system with Earth at its center. Around it, points of light were gathering. Each point represented a ship, a delegation from one of the surviving civilizations of the galaxy. They want answers, said. We all want answers. How have you done this? What protects you? What makes humanity different? Lisa looked at the gathering lights and felt the weight of history pressing down on her. She did not have answers. She did not know why the Harvesters had not come for Earth, but she knew one thing. Humanity would not hide, not now, not ever. We will find out together, she said. Over the following weeks, the delegations arrived. Species that had never revealed themselves to outsiders came to the Sol system. They came in ships that were dark and silent, ships built for running rather than fighting. They came with fear in their eyes and questions on their lips. Dr. Mary Cole worked day and night to communicate with them all. She learned fragments of a dozen languages. She studied the histories of civilizations that had survived in the shadows for millions of years, and she began to see a pattern. Every species had the same story. They had once been bright and loud, just like humanity. They had built cities and sent signals into space, and then the harvesters had come for their neighbors. They had watched from a distance as world after world was consumed, and they had learned the only lesson that mattered: hide or die. But humanity had never learned that lesson. Humanity had never had to. Mary brought her findings to Commander Ben Carter, the military officer in charge of analyzing the harvester threat. He was a serious man with a sharp mind, and he listened to her report without interruption. "So the entire galaxy is full of species that are afraid of these machines," he said when she finished. "Not just afraid," Mary replied. "They have organized their entire civilizations around avoiding detection. They do not fight. They do not explore. They do not expand. They simply survive generation after generation in the dark." Ben leaned back in his chair. "And we are the only ones who have not done this." "As far as we can tell, yes." Ben was silent for a long moment. Then he pulled up a star map on his console. He zoomed in on the Sol system, on the tiny blue dot that was Earth. "Then we need to find out why," he said. "Because whatever has protected us for the past 200 years might not protect us forever. And if the harvesters ever decide to come for us, we need to be ready." Mary nodded. She knew he was right. Humanity had stumbled onto something important, something that had kept them safe without their knowledge. But luck did not last forever. Somewhere out in the darkness, the harvesters were waiting, and sooner or later they would come. The Sol system had become the busiest place in the galaxy. Ships arrived every day, carrying delegates from species that had hidden in the darkness for thousands of years. They came from distant stars with names humans could not pronounce. They came with technologies that made Earth's science look primitive, and they all came with the same question burning in their minds. Why had humanity survived? Commander Ben Carter stood in the war room of Earth Defense Command, watching the data scroll across his screens. His team had been working around the clock for months, analyzing every piece of information the alien delegations had shared. They had studied the harvesters. They had mapped their movements. They had tried to understand the patterns of destruction that had shaped the galaxy for millions of years. And they had found something strange. Engineer Sam Turner, a brilliant young man with messy hair and dark circles under his eyes, burst into the war room with a tablet clutched in his hands. He had not slept in 3 days, and his voice cracked with excitement. "Commander, I found it," he said. "I found the pattern." Ben turned to face him. "Show me." Sam pulled up a holographic display and projected a timeline onto the wall. It showed the movement of the harvesters through the galaxy over the past 2 million years. Red dots marked the civilizations they had destroyed. Blue dots marked the ones that had survived by hiding. And there, in the middle of it all, was the Sol system. "The harvesters passed through our region of space approximately 12,000 years ago," Sam said, "right at the end of what we call the last ice age. They scanned every system within 1,000 light years." Ben frowned. 12,000 years ago, humanity was still living in caves. We had no technology. We should have been invisible to them. "That is what I thought at first," Sam replied. "But look at this." He zoomed in on the Sol system and highlighted something that made Ben's blood run cold. There were energy readings, faint traces of weapons fire, signs of combat that had been buried under 12,000 years of cosmic dust. "There was a battle here," Sam said quietly. "The harvesters came to Earth, and something fought back." The room went silent. Every officer stared at the holographic display with wide eyes. The implications were staggering. "You are saying that humans fought the harvesters," Ben said slowly. 12,000 years ago, when we had nothing but stone tools and fire." "I am saying something fought them," Sam corrected. "Whether it was humans or something else I cannot say, but the harvesters came here and they left. They did not harvest Earth. They did not strip it bare. They retreated." Ben turned to look at Dr. Mary Cole, who had been called in to help interpret the findings. "Is there any evidence of this in human history?" Mary nodded slowly. Her face was pale and her hands trembled slightly. "I have been researching this since Sam first contacted me, and I found things, strange things." She pulled up a series of images on the display. Cave paintings from France, showing strange shapes in the sky. Ancient texts describing a war between men and metal demons. Myths from every culture on Earth, telling stories of gods who fell from the heavens and were destroyed by mortal warriors. "Every civilization on Earth has stories like this," Mary said. "We always assumed they were just myths, fantasy. But what if they were memories? What if our ancestors actually fought something? What if they won?" Ben felt a chill run down his spine. He had spent his entire career preparing for threats he could understand. Enemy nations, rogue factions, even the occasional asteroid. But this was something else entirely. "If this is true," he said, "then the harvesters are not ignoring us. They are avoiding us." "That is my theory," Sam agreed. "Something about Earth, about humans, registers as a threat to them. They came here once, and whatever happened was bad enough that they never came back." The news spread through the alien delegations like wildfire, and the other demanded to see the evidence. When they did, their reactions were mixed. Some were hopeful, some were skeptical, and some were afraid. A scientist named Tethys studied the data for hours before speaking. "If this is true," she said, "then it changes everything we know about the harvesters. We have always believed they were unstoppable, inevitable, but if they can be fought, then they can be beaten," Lisa Grant finished. Shook his head. "You do not understand. The harvesters have destroyed thousands of civilizations, species far more advanced than yours, species with weapons and fleets and technologies beyond your imagination. All of them fell. All of them were harvested." "But not us," Lisa replied. "We are still here." "You do not know why," insisted. "You do not know what your ancestors did or how they did it. For all you know, it was luck, chance, a mistake the harvesters made but will not repeat." Lisa looked at him with steady eyes. "Then we will find out. We will dig through every piece of evidence. We will study every myth and every legend. And when we understand what happened 12,000 years ago, we will be ready for whatever comes next." The investigation took months. Teams of archaeologists and historians worked alongside alien scientists to uncover the truth. They dug through ancient ruins. They decoded forgotten languages. They pieced together a story that had been lost for. And slowly, the picture became clear. 12,000 years ago, the harvesters had come to Earth. They had scanned the planet and found a species on the edge of intelligence, a species that was loud and aggressive and spreading across the globe, a species that should have been easy prey. But when the harvesters descended, something unexpected happened. The humans did not run, they did not hide, they did not surrender. They fought. With stone spears and primitive weapons, they attacked the machines. They died by the thousands, by the tens of thousands, but they kept coming. Wave after wave, generation after generation. They refused to stop. They refused to give up. And the harvesters, for the first time in their existence, encountered something they did not understand. A species that would rather die than submit. A species that viewed death not as the end, but as a price worth paying for survival. The machines were not designed for this. They were designed to harvest passive populations, not to fight endless wars against creatures that refused to surrender. Their logic could not process an enemy that welcomed destruction. So they left. They marked Earth as a threat. They programmed their systems to avoid the Sol system, and they moved on to easier targets. When Sam presented the final report to the United Earth Council, the room was silent. Leaders from every nation sat frozen in their seats. The weight of what they were hearing was almost too much to bear. "Our ancestors saved us," Sam said. "Not with technology, not with weapons, but with something the harvesters could not understand, with courage, with defiance, with the simple refusal to accept defeat." Lisa Grant stood up and looked around the room. "The galaxy has been hiding for millions of years," she said. "They have been running from the harvesters because they believed there was no other choice. But there is another choice. Our ancestors proved it. We can fight. We can win." The council erupted in debate. Some members argued for caution. Others demanded immediate military buildup. But in the end, the decision was unanimous. Humanity would not hide. Humanity would prepare. And when the harvesters returned, they would learn why the Sol system had been marked as a threat. Out in the darkness of space, aboard his silent flagship, watched the humans with new eyes. For 50,000 years, his people had lived in fear. They had hidden and run and survived by being invisible. But now he saw another way, a terrible, beautiful, terrifying way. He saw species that were willing to die rather than kneel. And for the first time in his long life, felt something he had never felt before. Hope. The galaxy was divided. The news about humanity had spread to every hidden civilization, to every species that had spent cowering in the darkness. Some of them looked at the evidence and saw hope. They saw a chance to finally stop running. They saw the possibility of a future where they could live without fear. But others saw something different. They saw a reckless species that was going to get everyone killed. They saw humans lighting fires and making noise, drawing the attention of the harvesters back to a region of space that had been quiet for 12,000 years. And they decided that humanity had to be destroyed before it was too late. The coalition formed in secret. 12 species came together, united by terror and desperation. They did not hate humans. They simply believed that the survival of the galaxy depended on silencing Earth before the harvesters returned. Ambassador Lisa Grant learned of the plot from an unexpected source. A young diplomat named came to her quarters in the middle of the night. He was trembling, and his large, dark eyes were filled with shame. "They are coming for you," he whispered. "The coalition. They have gathered a fleet of 300 ships. They will attack your colonies tomorrow." Lisa felt her heart stop. "How do you know this?" "Because my government is part of it," replied. "Tried to stop them." He argued that humanity offered a new path, but the council was too afraid. They voted for war. Lisa grabbed her communications device and sent an emergency message to Earth Command. Within minutes, the entire military was on alert. Ships scrambled from every base in the system. Defenses were activated around every colony. But there was not enough time. The attack came at dawn, Earth Standard Time. 300 ships dropped out of hyperspace near Jupiter and began their assault. They hit the mining stations first, destroying the communication arrays to prevent calls for help. Then they moved toward Europa, where the largest human colony outside of Mars was located. Captain Jake was still in command of the Horizon, and he was one of the first to respond. His ship was outclassed, but he did not hesitate. He pointed his vessel toward the enemy fleet and engaged. "All hands battle stations," he said over the intercom. His voice was calm, almost peaceful. "This is not a drill, we are at war." The crew responded without a word. They had trained for this moment. They had hoped it would never come, but they were ready. The Battle of Europa was supposed to be a slaughter. The coalition had superior numbers, superior technology, and superior firepower. They expected the humans to surrender or flee. They expected a quick victory. They were wrong. The horizon dove into the enemy formation like a wolf among sheep. Jake had studied military history his entire life. He knew how David had beaten Goliath. He knew how small forces had defeated larger ones throughout human history, and he applied every lesson he had ever learned. His ship twisted and spun through enemy fire. It used the gravity of Jupiter's moons to slingshot around attacks. It fired its weapons with precision that the coalition had never seen before. And when the horizon was finally hit, when flames erupted across its hull and systems began to fail, Jake did something the coalition could not comprehend. He kept fighting. "Ram the lead ship," he ordered. His first officer, a woman named Grace, looked at him with wide eyes. "Sir, that will destroy us." "I know," Jake replied. "Do it anyway." The horizon accelerated toward the coalition flagship. The enemy ship tried to evade, but it was too slow. The collision tore both vessels apart in a ball of fire that lit up the darkness of space. Jake died in that explosion, but his sacrifice bought time for reinforcements to arrive. Across the solar system, human forces responded with the same ferocity. Miners on the asteroid stations turned their drilling equipment into weapons. Cargo pilots used their ships as battering rams. Scientists on Europa grabbed anything that could be used as a tool of war and joined the fight. The coalition had expected humans to value their lives above all else. That was how survival worked. That was how every species in the galaxy had learned to behave. But humans were different. Commander Ben Carter coordinated the defense from Earth Command, watching the battle unfold on screens that showed death and destruction on a scale he had never imagined. But he also saw something else. He saw humans refusing to give up. He saw them fighting with a fury that logic. And he saw the coalition begin to break. The first ships to retreat were They had joined the coalition reluctantly, and when they saw what humans were capable of, they lost their nerve. Other species followed. Within hours, the attack had collapsed. The remaining coalition ships sent a single transmission as they fled back to the darkness between stars. The message was recorded and played for the United Earth Council later that day. "They do not fear death," the coalition commander said. His voice was shaking. "We do not understand. We cannot fight an enemy that welcomes destruction. We cannot defeat a species that would rather die than surrender." Lisa Grant listened to the recording in silence. Around her, the council members were celebrating. They had survived. They had won. But Lisa felt no joy. She thought of Jake and the crew of the Horizon. She thought of all the humans who had died to protect their homes. And she knew that this was just the beginning. The galaxy had seen what humanity was capable of. Some would be inspired, others would be terrified, and the harvesters, somewhere out in the endless dark, would eventually learn what had happened. When the celebrations ended, Lisa called a meeting with. The old alien arrived with his head bowed, ashamed of what his people had done. "I am sorry," he said. "I tried to stop them, I failed." Lisa looked at him without anger. "You came to warn us, that is what matters." Raised his eyes. "Your species continues to surprise me. When I heard about the coalition's plan, I expected you to negotiate, to offer peace, to do anything to avoid conflict. That is what every other species would have done." "We are not every other species," Lisa replied. "No," agreed, "you are not." He moved to the window and looked out at the stars. "For 50,000 years, my people have survived by avoiding conflict, by running, by hiding. We believed that was the only way, but you have shown us something different." He turned back to face her. "You have shown us that survival is not the same as living, that there are things worth fighting for, worth dying for." Lisa joined him at the window. "The coalition will not attack again. They are too afraid now." "Yes," said, "but the harvesters will come eventually. They always do. And when they arrive, will you fight them as you fought the coalition?" Lisa was silent for a long moment. Then she nodded. Yes, we will fight, we will probably die, but we will not hide, we will not run, we will face them standing up. Studied her face. Then slowly, he did something No had done in thousands of years. He smiled. Then perhaps, he said quietly, we will stand with you. Across the galaxy, the footage of the Battle of Europa spread like fire. Species that had hidden for millions of years watched humans charging into certain death and emerging victorious. They watched a species that refused to kneel, that chose destruction over submission. And one by one, they began to ask themselves a question they had never considered before. What if we stopped hiding? What if we stopped running? What if we stood up and fought? The galaxy was changing, and humanity, loud and reckless and utterly fearless, was leading the way. 5 years passed after the Battle of Europa. 5 years of preparation. 5 years of building weapons and training soldiers and uniting species that had never trusted each other before. 5 years of waiting for the inevitable. And then the harvesters came. Commander Ben Carter was in the war room when the sensors detected them. A fleet of machines so vast it blotted out the stars, emerging from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. There were thousands of them, tens of thousands, more harvesters than any species in the galaxy had ever seen gathered in one place. The room went silent. Every officer stared at the screens with faces drained of color. The numbers were impossible. Even with 5 years of preparation, even with allies from a dozen species, humanity was outnumbered beyond any hope of victory. Ben turned to his communications officer. Send word to the fleet, all ships to defensive positions. This is it. The message went out across the system. Human vessels moved into formation around Earth and Mars and the outer colonies. Beside them flew ships from half a dozen other species that had chosen to stand rather than run. Ambassador Lisa Grant watched from the bridge of the new flagship Unity. She had spent 5 years preparing for this moment. 5 years building alliances and convincing frightened species that there was another way. Now all that work would be tested. Stood beside her, his 4 arms clasped behind his back. He had become a different being in the past 5 years. The fear that had once defined him had been replaced by something stronger, something that looked almost like determination. They are larger than I imagined, he said quietly. Lisa nodded. Yes, they are. We will probably die today. Yes, Lisa agreed, we probably will. Turned to look at her, and yet you do not seem afraid. Lisa smiled. I am terrified, but fear and courage are not opposites. You can be afraid and still choose to fight. The harvester fleet advanced. Their black ships moved in perfect formation, each one a mountain of metal and destruction. They sent no messages. They made no demands. They simply came as they had come for millions of years to harvest another civilization. Ben Carter gave the order to attack. The battle began in the space between Mars and Jupiter. Human ships led the charge, their engines burning bright in the darkness. Behind them came the vessels of the allied species, their crews fighting for the first time in their civilization's histories. The harvesters responded with devastating firepower. Their weapons tore through ships like paper. Their machines adapted to every tactic within minutes. They were ancient and patient and utterly without mercy. Dr. Mary Cole watched the battle from a research station on Luna. She had spent the past 5 years studying the harvesters, trying to understand them. And in the final hours before the attack, she had made a breakthrough. The signal, she said to herself, pulling up the ancient transmission she had decoded months ago. It is not just a warning, it is a command. She ran the analysis again, her hands shaking. The harvesters were machines. They followed programming. And that programming included a set of rules, a list of conditions that defined how they operated. One of those conditions was avoidance. The harvesters were designed to avoid certain types of targets, targets that registered as threats, targets that were too dangerous to harvest. And Mary finally understood what made humanity qualify. She grabbed her communicator and called Ben Carter directly. "Commander, I know how to stop them." Ben was in the middle of coordinating a retreat. His forces were being pushed back. Ships were dying by the hundreds. "I am a little busy, Doctor." "The harvesters are programmed to flee from aggressive species," Mary said rapidly. "Species that will not stop fighting. Species that treat death as acceptable. Their creators feared such species. They built the harvesters to avoid them." Ben paused. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that the harvesters will retreat if they believe the cost of victory is too high. They are not designed to fight wars of attrition. They are designed to harvest passive populations. If we show them that we will never stop fighting, that we will keep coming no matter how many of us die, they will withdraw." Ben looked at his screens. His fleet was being destroyed. His people were dying. And Mary was telling him that the only way to win was to convince the enemy that humanity would pay any price for victory. He turned to his communications officer. "Open a channel. Broadcast on all frequencies. I want the harvesters to hear this." The channel opened. Ben took a breath and spoke. "Attention, Harvester Fleet. This is Commander Ben Carter of the United Earth Defense Force. We know what you are. We know why you came. And we have a message for you." He paused, looking at the destruction on his screens. "We will not run. We will not hide. We will not surrender. You can kill every one of us, and with our dying breath we will still be fighting. You can destroy our ships and we will attack you with rocks. You can burn our worlds and we will hunt you through the ashes." His voice hardened. "We are humanity. We have been fighting since we crawled out of caves with nothing but sticks and fire. We fought predators. We fought nature. We fought each other, and we won. Every time, we won." He leaned forward. "So come, harvest us if you can, but know that it will cost you everything. Know that we will make you bleed. And know that the galaxy is watching. Every species that has ever hidden from you is seeing this battle. If you destroy us, they will know you can be hurt. They will know you can be fought. And one day they will come for you too." The channel closed. For a long moment nothing happened. The battle continued. Ships exploded. Machines advanced. And then the harvesters stopped. The entire fleet halted in place. Their weapons went silent. Their movement ceased. For one endless minute nothing moved. Then they began to turn. One by one, the harvester ships oriented toward the edge of the system. Their engines fired, and they began to retreat. Across the battlefield, cheering erupted. Human crews celebrated. Allied species wept with joy. The impossible had happened. The harvesters were leaving. Lisa Grant watched them go with tears streaming down her face. Around her, the bridge of the Unity was filled with celebration, but she could not stop staring at the retreating fleet. "They are gone," said softly. "You did it." Lisa shook her head. "We did it, all of us. Humanity, every species that chose to stand instead of hide." She turned to look at him. "The galaxy is different now. The fear is broken. They know that the harvesters can be faced. They know that hiding is not the only option." Nodded slowly. "Yes, they know." He paused. "What happens next?" Lisa looked out at the stars. For millions of years, the galaxy had been dark. Species had lived in shadows, too afraid to show themselves. But that was over now. "Now we rebuild," she said. "We help the species that want to come out of hiding. We share technology. We build alliances. We create something the galaxy has never seen before, a civilization that lives in the light." She smiled. "We become what humanity was always meant to be. Not conquerors, not destroyers, but a beacon, a light that shows others the way." On planets across the galaxy, species that had hidden for were emerging. They turned on their lights. They broadcast their signals. They stopped running. They were the first, returned to his and spoke to the council. He told them what he had seen. He told them about humans who would rather die than kneel. He told them that there was another way to live. One by one, the council members voted to end their isolation. Other species followed. The dozens of civilizations that had never known anything but fear began to emerge from the shadows. And at the center of it all was Earth, small and blue and utterly unimportant by galactic standards, but also the world that had changed everything. Years later, stood on a balcony overlooking a city that glowed with lights. Below him, humans and walked together through streets that would have been unthinkable a generation ago. Lisa Grant joined him, older now but still carrying that same fire in her eyes. "You look thoughtful," she said. Nodded. "I was thinking about the first question I asked your species. How have you survived this long without hiding?" Lisa smiled. "Did you ever find the answer?" Turned to look at her. "Yes, I believe I have." And he looked out at the lights of the city, at the ships lifting off toward the stars, at the future that humanity had made possible. "You survived because you refused to accept that survival was enough. You wanted more. You wanted to live, to grow, to reach for the stars even when the universe tried to push you down. You survived because you were too stubborn, too reckless, too human to do anything else." He paused. "And in doing so, you awakened the rest of us." Lisa stood beside him in silence. Across the galaxy, lights were coming on. Species that had hidden for millions of years were finally living. And humanity, loud and bright and utterly fearless, had led them into the dawn.